Have you ever heard that saying, love is blind? Well, get this. Today we're looking at a case that suggests justice might be blind too, but maybe not in the way we'd like.
Oh.
Just imagine, okay, a young woman found murdered.
Hmm.
All signs point to this prominent guy in town, right?
Right.
But here's the twist. His wife, she's drop-dead gorgeous. And that, believe it or not, that might have swayed the jury.
You're kidding, right? That's wild.
No kidding. This really happened back in 1878 Connecticut, the case of Mary Stannard.
Wow.
It makes you think, about how societal biases, even the ones we don't realize we have, they can really mess with justice.
It really does make you wonder, so who was this Mary Stannard?
Well, she was a young woman, only 22, hardworking, raising her son William all on her own in this small town. And William, he was just 2 years old at the time.
Must have been tough, especially back then.
Absolutely. Being an unwed mother in the 1800s, that was a huge social stigma.
Right.
But even with all that, Mary, she had this resilience, this cheerful spirit that people remembered her for.
It's amazing how some people can face such adversity and still come out shining.
It really is. Now, into this picture comes Reverend Herbert Hayden, a charismatic preacher, brand new to town with his family.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, they actually hired Mary. She became their live-in nanny, and, well, let's just say things got complicated.
Complicated how?
Rumors started flying, people whispering about an affair between Mary and the Reverend. And to make matters even juicier, Hayden's wife, Rosa,
Yeah.
she was pregnant with her third child.
Oh, wow. So you have this affair happening right under the roof of a respected religious leader. That's gotta be a scandal in a small town.
Oh, you better believe it. It was the talk of the town, and it really set the stage for the tragedy that was about to unfold.
Tragedy, what happened?
Well, on Mary's 22nd birthday, she went out to pick blackberries, never came home.
Oh, no.
It was her father who found her, by a creek, throat slashed, head wound, her berry pail just lying there empty. A truly awful scene.
That's horrible.
The autopsy, conducted by Dr. Rufus Matthew, it really emphasized the brutality of the attack.
Yeah.
They said the throat wound, it was incredibly deep and violent. And there was this other wound on her head, shaped like a star, probably from being hit with something.
So blunt force trauma as well. Did they ever figure out what caused that?
Not definitively, no. But what was interesting is that there was no sign of sexual assault.
Really? That's unusual, isn't it? For a murder like this, I mean.
It was. And of course, suspicion immediately fell on Reverend Hayden, especially when Mary's sister, Susan Hawley, she stepped forward.
What did she say?
Susan revealed that Mary had confided in her, told her that she thought she was pregnant with Hayden's child.
Oh, no wonder she was desperate. What was she going to do?
Well, that's where the investigation took a darker turn. During the inquest, it came out that Hayden had bought arsenic.
Arsenic? What for?
He claimed it was for rats, said he needed rat poison. But here's the thing. Back then, arsenic was also used in, well, let's just say it was a common ingredient in things that could induce abortions.
Oh, I see. So now you have motive. A murdered woman, a scandalous affair, and this purchase that looks very suspicious. This case seems pretty straightforward, doesn't it?
You'd think so, right? But it's not that simple. Not at all.
Ah, why not? What happened?
The first trial, it was held in the basement of the town hall.
The basement.
Yeah. People described it as cramped, poorly lit, like a dungeon almost. And from the get-go, the judge, who was actually part of Hayden's congregation,
Oh, no.
yeah, he showed clear favoritism toward the Reverend.
That doesn't sound good. Did anyone call him out on it?
It gets worse.
Yeah.
This judge, he actually said he was more certain of Hayden's innocence than he was of the existence of heaven.
Hold on. He actually said that. A
Yeah.
judge. That's unbelievable.
It set a very troubling tone for the whole trial, that's for sure. During the trial, Rosa, Hayden's wife, she testified.
What did she say?
She defended her husband, of course, claimed the blood they found on the knife, which they discovered in their barn, that it was from her husband cutting his finger while chopping wood.
Chopping wood. Come on, that's a little too convenient.
Right. And the defense, they piled it on. They brought in these so-called experts who just threw around all this scientific jargon, basically confusing the jury.
Sounds like they were trying to create a smokescreen more than anything else.
Exactly. And the crazy part is, it worked.
What? Seriously?
Despite all the evidence, the judge dismissed the charges. Just like that.
No. What about Mary's family?
They were devastated. The whole community was stunned. But the prosecutor, a man named H. Lynn Harrison, he wasn't giving up.
Good for him. What did he do?
He pushed to have Mary's body exhumed.
Exhumed? Why?
Because he had a hunch. And that hunch, it paid off. The second autopsy revealed something shocking. They found a lethal dose of arsenic in Mary's stomach.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Wait a minute, that arsenic Hayden bought.
They tested it, and it's a match. The same type they found in Mary's body.
So finally, he's going to be held accountable, right?
You'd think so, wouldn't you? But that's not what happened. Instead, the community rallied around Hayden. They started seeing him as the victim, a good man persecuted by the system. They even raised money for his defense.
That's unbelievable. So instead of turning against him after the new evidence, they actually supported him more.
It's a strange twist, right? They just couldn't or wouldn't believe that this man of God, could be capable of something so horrible. So we go into the second trial with this really strange dynamic, a case that seems open and shut, but where the accused has become, well, almost like a hero to some.
Wow. This is just, I can't believe this actually happened. What happened at the second trial? It's a head scratcher, for sure. I mean, how do you go from arsenic in the victim's stomach, matching the arsenic he bought, to people seeing him as a victim?
Well, in the second trial, the defense, they really went for the jugular. Instead of addressing the evidence head-on, they just attacked Mary's character, tried to paint her as, promiscuous, unreliable, someone with a lot of lovers, basically implying anyone could have been responsible for her death.
So, classic victim blaming, taking the focus off Hayden and putting it all on Mary.
Exactly. They even went so far as to suggest her own family was involved, painted them as immoral and untrustworthy. It was a real smear campaign.
Wow. And the jury bought it, with all that arsenic evidence out there.
It's important to remember the times. This was the 1800s. Women, especially unmarried mothers like Mary, they were often seen as, well, less than credible. Their word didn't hold the same weight as a man's, especially a man of God like Hayden.
So the jury might have been more willing to believe the defense's story, no matter how outlandish, because it fit their prejudices.
Exactly. And there's another piece to this puzzle. We haven't talked about Rosa, Hayden's wife.
Oh, right. The beautiful wife. What role did she play in all this?
She was a constant presence at both trials, always by her husband's side, often with their children. This picture of loyalty and, well, she was stunningly beautiful. This really contrasted with how they were portraying Mary.
So you're saying her beauty might have actually influenced people's opinions?
I think so. It's almost like Rosa's beauty created this halo effect around Hayden, making it harder to believe he could do such a terrible thing. Do you think people realized this was happening? Or was it more subconscious?
It was probably both. I mean, consciously, people might have been swayed by her looks and her composure, found her more believable than, the image they were painting of Mary, but subconsciously, we're wired to judge based on appearance. Attractiveness gets linked with positive traits like trustworthiness, even when there's no logical reason for that.
So Rosa's beauty, intentionally or not, it became a weapon for the defense, playing on those deep-seated biases we all have.
Right, and this case shows how powerful those biases can be. Even in a courtroom where facts should matter most, it's scary to think that even strong evidence can be overshadowed by prejudice.
It is. So what about the second trial? Did the jury finally see through the defense's tricks? Did they get justice for Mary?
Well, about that. The second trial, it ended in a mistrial. The jury couldn't agree on a verdict. 11 voted guilty, but 1 juror held out. And the reason for that holdout, well, it's probably the most unsettling part of this whole story.
Okay, now I really have to hear this. What could possibly make someone vote to acquit when there's so much evidence?
Get this. Decades later, long after the trials were over, the last juror alive from that second trial, he finally admitted why they couldn't reach a verdict. He said the jury was so captivated by Rosa, by her beauty, that they couldn't bring themselves to convict her husband.
You're kidding? Are you serious?
He actually said something like, "How could we convict a man with a beautiful young wife like that?"
So all the evidence, all the arguments, none of it mattered as much as how she looked. It's like Mary's story, her life, it all became secondary to this image of Hayden and his perfect family. Tragic.
It's a chilling example of how our biases, even the ones we don't realize we have, can actually derail justice. It makes you wonder, how often does this happen, even today?
Right. You think about it, we have forensic evidence, witnesses, and yet this juror admits it was Rosa's beauty that swayed them. It just makes you question, what is justice, really, if something like that can tip the scales?
It's unsettling, for sure. I mean, what would justice have looked like for Mary? It's too late to go back, obviously, but we can learn from this, look at our own systems today, and see if those same biases are still at play.
So how do we make sure a victim's background or a defendant's looks don't influence a case? What can we do to prevent these unconscious biases from taking over?
Well, first, we got to admit they exist. We all have biases, even if we think we're totally objective. Judges, lawyers, jurors, everyone. We need to educate people about this, make them aware.
But knowing about it isn't enough, right? What can we actually do during a trial to make sure these biases don't creep in?
We can start with jury selection. Try to get more diverse juries, people from different backgrounds. That way, they're more likely to challenge each other's assumptions, catch those moments when bias might be sneaking in.
That makes sense. A jury with different perspectives would be more likely to focus on the facts, right? Not get sidetracked by irrelevant things.
Exactly. And there are other ideas too. Some experts suggest using blind procedures where the jury doesn't know certain things about the defendant or the victim, like their appearance, their social status. That way, they have to focus on the evidence alone.
So, like trying to create that image of blind justice. Lady Justice with the blindfold, weighing things fairly.
Yeah, kind of. But it's not just about the image. It's about making the system actually fair. And that means changing some of our deeply held beliefs about how justice works.
It's a big challenge, but this case shows us why it matters. If we can learn from these past mistakes, if we can be honest about our own biases and work to overcome them, maybe, just maybe, we can create a system where justice is truly blind, where everyone, no matter who they are, gets a fair shot.
And for all of you listening out there, we encourage you to do your own digging. Look into cases in your community, learn about the history of your local courts, and most importantly, talk about this. Talk about how we can create a more just future. Because the path to justice, it starts with knowledge, awareness, and a willingness to challenge the way things are.
Well said. And on that note, we'll wrap up our deep dive into the case of Mary Stannard. Thanks for joining us. We'll be back soon with another intriguing case that'll make you think, question, and hopefully inspire you to push for a fairer world for all.